LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Lydia. My name is Lydia Khalil. Today we are going to be talking about a word we hear a lot. We're going to be talking about trauma. What is trauma? How does it affect us? What is PTSD? Today I've got a lady who is going to join me to talk about what trauma is, how it impacts us, how we can manage it better. Is there a way out? Is there recovery? Is recovery possible? Please join me as I welcome Dr. Timi Oyebode. Good evening, Dr. Timi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma, I can hear you.
All right. Good evening. I was just doing the intro and it took a bit of delay before you came through. Okay. Do you want to talk a bit about yourself? Tell us a bit about you.
Thank you so much. Yes. So I am Timi Oyebode, the head counselor and the provost at KDI Counseling here in Lagos, Nigeria. So I work as a psychotherapist, and I've been in that practice for maybe about 16, 17 years now. I'm also a Christian, so sometimes, of course, faith-based believer, and I'm passionate about God. Literally, I'm passionate about mental health. I'm passionate about recovery from trauma. I'm passionate about people being able to live the best life they can, despite having to go through any form of pain or challenges in their past. That's who I am. I hope that describes me.
Yes. And what took you on this path, on this journey of psychotherapy?
Okay. So for me, I think it's like I always say that I didn't discover myself in this pathway. I think this pathway found me. It's more like a calling, like a passion. And so basically, I had turbulent childhood in terms of being a victim of childhood abuse and severe traumas. I lost my dad at the very tender age of 9. And then I had to see my mom struggle to raise myself and my siblings, and then having to survive in all of that, being a female child in a very oppressive society. So I was exposed to a series of abuse from family members to external people. And then at some point in my journey, I couldn't fathom it anymore on my own. So because I ended up being into a lot of sexual dysfunction, including porn, masturbation, lesbianism, wide range of it. Twice I made an attempt to take my life. So I had tried suicide twice. I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with a lot of mental illnesses and a lot of so many things put together. Unfortunately, because I was a Christian, And so I was living a life that wasn't reflecting my struggle. Okay, so a perfect way of hiding it, moving on. Though at some point, actually, I also disowned God, and I disowned Christianity. And then I began to explore with other religions and moved out of the faith until a time came again when my healing started, actually. And then it took me years. It took me a journey of self-discovery, encountering God afresh, and then being healed, and then being able to take the same healing back to a hurting world. So I began to go into learn and go into the School of Humanities, become a student of psychotherapy, began my journey into degree to master's to PhD in understanding how the human mind works. So I could be able to help out with a balance of the spiritual healing as well as the psychological healing, as well as the physical healing, a balance of the total man, the body, the spirit, and the soul. So usually I say that's my story in summary. Someone who had been down there, who found hope again, and then also wants to give the same hope to other hurting souls.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I think that was really personal. Most of the time, people just give a summary, like as they say in church, when people testify, they don't tell you the whole story. They just edit it nicely in a way that is palatable to the people hearing. So quite a lot of, I guess, trauma, and then which resulted in dysfunction and you acting out and experimenting and maybe seeking for love or really calling for help, but expressing it in a destructive way. And somehow God helped you to realign yourself, and then you took on the journey of learning and wanting to help others. I mean, it really touches on a lot of points. And one of the reasons of me wanting to have this program was also to help, I think, let me say people of color, let me not just say Black people, sort of acknowledge that we do have mental health. There is some, would you say it's fair to say that most of the time we don't like to admit that we are struggling with some type of mental illness? So let's even use something like depression. Well, I'm saying that from my experience. Is that something similar to yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
really, truly, oftentimes many of us do not admit. Why? Because of the stigmatization that comes along with some of the things. That's one. The other reason is also because we're not even aware that we're struggling. Many of us don't even know that that what we're going through is a form of mental illness. Okay, we just think, oh, I'm just having a bad time. Okay, and so we're not paying attention to what our mind and our body is telling us in view of what is going on with us. So yeah, because of stigmatization, we don't want people labeling us like, oh, is she mad, or does she have a problem, And so we would rather not talk about it. And then especially if it now comes to people of faith, it's a bit more challenging to even talk about it because, oh, you're supposed to be spiritually mature. You're supposed to be born again enough. You shouldn't be going through depression. Those are the assumptions out there, thinking that depression is a choice. It's some of the challenges I think that people could choose. You could choose not to be depressed, something like that. That you're supposed to get out of it on your own, something like that. But sometimes the reality is when awareness sets in about what really mental health is, it begins to help us to understand it better, and then it helps us also to address it. So basically, putting that into perspective is saying that, first of all, knowing that mental health is also same or very similar with physical health. So if we say that, or spiritual health, so if we say that you are fine, as in you're not sick, you don't have malaria, you don't have typhoid, you're not sick physically, the same way, because in physical health, we have various degrees of illnesses that comes in to make us indispensable or unavailable for a period of time. It necessarily does not incapacitate us totally. But when we start getting to some levels, maybe you start talking about cancer, you start talking about some big sicknesses. Those ones can incapacitate us, as in totally. The same thing with mental health. So mental health is a state, the WHO defined it as a state of wellness, physically, emotionally, and socially. A state of wellness. So mental health is not the challenge. It's about mental illnesses, or what we call mental disorders. The same way we have physical illnesses, we have mental illnesses. And the same way, mental illnesses could be in varying degrees. So being sad, or being unable to sleep, having insomnia, or going through some level of self-isolation without, it's not like it's needful or whatever, or having suicidal thoughts, or feeling dejected, having this extreme feeling of betrayal or aloneness. Okay, those are actually levels of mental illnesses. It's just the fact that they are still mild. They are not what should give us concern. So actually, averagely, almost all of us at one point or the other would have a level of mental illness. So it's something now that we need to bring so much awareness into, so that people don't keep looking at the big illnesses only when defining mental challenges or mental struggles.
So it's actually something that is with us more than we realize. That's what you're saying. Because on average, I don't think anybody will honestly say, I've never had a low period. I've never had a period where I didn't want to speak to anybody. I've never had a period where I was just angry or just frustrated. And
you get it.
And
you get it.
I think what you're saying is, if people are aware of what it feels like when you're in distress, when you're in a low mood, when you feel like not speaking to anybody, if they can identify those moments, then they can do something, then they can rectify. But if they don't, then it's actually not, they're not aware of it. They don't know they're suffering. They can't get help. And they just continue in that place. And I think what happens more, I think, with people of color is because it becomes part of their identity. So they will say, that man is always angry. Yeah. That auntie never allows anybody to visit them. She's really quirky, so you have to phone her, and she has to give you notice. But the notice that she's giving you is because she has to prepare mentally and be ready to see you. She's just not somebody you can knock on the door and she's there. So I guess if we all even reflect in ourselves and the people around us, we can also begin to identify and be able to empathize. So somebody who is really angry all the time has something going on for them. That's why that emotion is being expressed. Okay, so people of faith feel, and I could say that quite generously, that actually I think Christians are not allowed to become ill. We're not allowed to become ill physically or mentally. I think either there are no.
Or spiritually.
Yeah. Like really spiritual people don't even get headaches. God forbid they get something like cancer. It means that they've sinned and something is wrong. And then when you're actually talking about mental health, they go to either the person is possessed. That is the only description. There's no bit in the middle, because obviously you can shake off depression. You can throw away that garment of heaviness quite easily. So the other spectrum to go to is either the person is mad,
Yeah.
is possessed, is oppressed. So there's no permission, I think. And that's, I guess, also another aim, that people are actually permitted to say, actually, I don't feel great. I think I'm suffering with depression or insomnia. And it doesn't always have to be a spiritual illness. You know, we
Yeah.
do know. I'm not taking away the fact that, you know, people can be possessed. I don't think Christians can be. They might be oppressed, but not possessed. But the permission to say, actually, God gave us emotions. Yeah. And we're allowed to own the emotions, and we're allowed to say, I'm feeling like this. It's not what you're feeling, it's how long you remain in that state. So somebody who is depressed is getting help. You know, they're either taking medication and having talking therapy, or maybe they're only having talking therapy.
So I would say, I would add to that, basically, because what you just said now is plainly the fact, is the truth, okay? So I would just probably add to that by saying that, people of faith have these challenges majorly because the church has not become actively involved in promoting mental health. In as much as we have a system that, okay, yes, you are expected to be spiritually mature, to make sure you are physically healthy, make sure you are spiritually healthy. You know, it's the same thing with your mental health. That's the perception. That's the belief. Well, that's not the reality. Which was one of the reasons the apostle said, "I wish above all things that you be in health, that you prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers." So it's telling us that for him, it was even a wish. It was a prayer, kind of, to the other person, knowing fully well that it's not something that comes automatically with our faith. Okay? And which also now begins to put into perspective that many times now we have a lot of churches or systems putting in some kind of physical support for people. So the physical, they make a lot of benevolent support programs. Food is being made available for people. Why don't you say because people are spiritually, they are born again, they don't need to eat? You know, but we are making deliberate efforts to tend to their physical needs. Sometimes clothing, sometimes wellness, you know. And then even now, we have a lot of church systems putting hospitals, making a hospital available. That's biological. That's taking care of our health. So if that is happening, then it once more. And you know, some years back, actually, the church also wasn't actually that open to even physical health. Some would say you don't need medications, prayers is enough. Yes, but let's always remember that prayers is enough. No one disputes that. The word of God is constant. No one disputes that. But the level of our faith is key to receiving either physical health, spiritual health, or mental health. And so if someone is struggling, it doesn't make them faithless. It doesn't make them not spiritual enough. Okay, it could be an attack or a struggle they are going through for that period of time that needs to be addressed and attended to.
Okay, so
I hope that makes sense, Ma.
Yes. Because church, what you're saying is, if church can acknowledge, that's why the Bible talks about a sound mind. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the concept of a sound mind. There wouldn't be a garment of heaviness. You know, there wouldn't be people in the Bible thinking of committing suicide. There wouldn't be people talking about their soul being so downcast. So, you know, we talk about betrayal. We talk about people who are bereaved. We talk about, people who are possessed. So the Bible is full of examples of people struggling at some point with mental health, as they do struggle with physical health. So if the
Exactly.
church actually acknowledges that actually for somebody to be whole, body, soul, and spirit,
A
the
spirit.
most important part actually is the mind, where the soul, the intellect, and all of
Yes.
that dwell. So
Yeah.
they can admit that it does happen, and actually that would encourage people, especially if they have programs that make people aware of what they
Yes.
might be experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
giving them,
Mm-hmm.
would we say, permission that it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad Christian if you do say you are struggling at some point, because most people do and would, just depending on how long the symptoms
Yeah.
last. Okay, so actually today I want us to focus on trauma, because that's a word we
Okay.
hear all the time.
Okay.
Especially young people, even
Okay.
I must admit that even sometimes I say, oh, I was so traumatized, something happened. So I think because it's bantered a lot, we hear it a lot, especially with young people talking about it. So we kind of minimize what it is really, yeah, because we're quite familiar with it. We use it a lot. So can you just explain in kind of layman's language what real trauma is? High level, low level, medium level trauma.
Okay. Okay. When you said explain real trauma, my mind went into, okay, is there a fake trauma?
No, like when I meant real trauma, I meant like
Yes, I
me
understand what you meant.
running now to the airport, and I'm late for my plane. I was so traumatized because I thought I was going to miss the plane, because we
Yes,
use it quite in
a
a
lot.
light, in a light
Mm-hmm.
way.
A lot. Yes, I'm
So
traumatized,
yes,
and all that. Yeah.
I was
Okay.
shocked. I got home, there was no food. Somebody said to me, "Oh, I was so." When that's what I meant by what actually, because it is something that happens to somebody that leaves an indelible mark. That's what
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really is trauma. Something that is difficult to recover from. I do know that we do say there's low level, medium, and high or multiple trauma. So I guess I've sort of explained it. It's something that happens to somebody that is something they can't forget, is indelible, and most of
Yeah.
the time it changes. It makes a marked change for them in their life.
Yeah.
It's a turning
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So
let's talk about.
normally, what we call trauma is referred to. Trauma is actually a Greek word. Okay, that means wounded. Okay, so in other words, when we say trauma, we're referring to inner wounds, like emotional wounds. Now, trauma could be caused by anything or anyhow, but there are some key things that we usually point out to confirm if someone has been traumatized or not. Okay, and that includes, okay, what's the event? What happened? And you would see that there's always a question of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also that place of, oh, the experience the person then had with the event. How did you feel about what happened? Okay, and then of course the third criteria usually is the effects, like what then begin to happen? What began to happen to you? How did you begin to respond anytime you remember that this had happened to you? And of course, because there are different kinds of traumas. What I need to emphasize here now that not everything that we think is bad that happens to people actually traumatizes them. Okay, and because so you could say, oh, yeah, she was raped. If she was raped, that means she was traumatized. No, no. Okay, it's not that way. What we use to define trauma usually is when the mind becomes wounded by an event that has happened. But then we look out for the duration. Because sometimes some things do happen to us that, like I said earlier when I was talking about mental illnesses, some infections, like it comes with physical health, would happen to us. Some minor things would happen to us, but we could scale over, we could move on. maybe the loss of a loved one, and we can move on. But someone else might lose a loved one and might not be able to move on. Okay, good. And then it could be also the fact that it just being able to see or being able to outline the consistency of the effect of that event in that person's life. So it could be anything. And sometimes it might not even be what happened to someone. It might be what happened to someone close to them that could traumatize them. So there are different things that lead to trauma. And this is inclusive of so many things, including accidents, including emotional abuse, including physical abuse, whatever, name it, could actually be playing out that place of trauma in the journey of each individual. So basically, putting that into perspective is saying, yeah, there could be one event that led someone into a state of emotional pain. There could be two. There could be multiple. Okay, someone lost a spouse, someone lost a child. This person could go on to lose a job. This person could feel overwhelmed by abandonment or betrayal by a friend. Okay, all of that. And then we could have someone who at the same time is lost a child, is going through sexual abuse, is going through workplace bullying, is going through so many things at a time. Those can be a source of trauma. But if the person can deal with it or find answers within themselves and be able to move on despite whatever they are going through, it could be fine. However, once they had spent an average of 4 weeks on the emotions or the effects of that event, then we could be dealing with someone who has been traumatized. And that's why you hear us talk about clinically, we talk about PTSD in such contexts.
So, part of what you've said is sometimes the impact depends on the individual. We've got a busy dog who is barking off there. So, I always use this illustration that people's minds are like an elastic band. Some people you can really stretch and they will be fine. Some people you stretch and they break. Yeah. And just like an elastic band, it probably will never fit again as tightly as it was. So I guess what you've explained is that some people have the capacity to deal with trauma better than the others. It's just something natural. And just because one person can manage it doesn't always mean another person can manage it as well. Okay, so let's not. So what is this 4-week or 1 month kind of rule around trauma? What does it signify?
Say that again, ma'am.
I said the 4-week. You explained that if the emotions have consistently gone on for 4 weeks, what does it signify? What kind of signals and impact does that have?
Okay. Like signs that we should look out for that let someone know if. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about things that borders on, for example. One major thing I'm quick to always point out to people is sleeplessness. Once you realize that you are struggling to sleep, once you realize that it's difficult, you get on your bed and you're just waking up at hot hours of the night, or you can't sleep for extended period, it's a sign to tell you something is already coming in, something is happening to your system. Another major one is persistent worry. You realize that you seem to be overwhelmed, and it's going on, and those are the emotions that we're saying. Once these emotions continue and they're persistent for over 4 weeks, that's like an average of a month. It's a sign to let you know something could be wrong. I've had of course, when we say worrying, some people have a higher level of that, what we refer to as anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, wherein you not just worry, but actually even getting overwhelmed with the worries. As in, it's persistent. They want to control the thoughts. The thoughts are not controllable. They keep coming on their own, even when the person is trying to move on. Okay, those could be signs to let them know something is wrong. Of course, sometimes also I always explain, once you realize that you start binging, or you start hitting unnecessarily. Okay, and it's also coming in persistently. You don't want to hit that thing, but you find yourself going to the fridge, the refrigerator, and you're picking stuff at all times of the day, all times of the night. Okay, those could be signs to tell you something is happening to your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also includes of that, one major one also that I should also mention is isolation. Okay. You just have this sense of, I don't want to be with people. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want anybody to see me. I don't want to even see anybody. And you start isolating yourself. You stop most of your social media connections. You're not calling anybody. You're not visiting, and you're not allowing anybody to check on you. Those could be signs telling us something has happened to you. And so we usually, I'm always quick to say, let's check it out. Look at in the past, and that's why I said an average of 4 weeks is needful. So I would always tell you, let's check it out. In the past 2 weeks, in the past 3 weeks, what happened to you? Did something happen? Was there something strategic that happened? And then remember, like I said earlier, it's not even about what happens to you sometimes when we talk about trauma. There's what we also call vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma refers to you who happen to work with someone who is traumatized, or you had it, or they shared their story to you.
Mm-hmm.
So just the fact that someone told you about the experience, maybe kidnapping, oh yeah, I was kidnapped, da 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 da, you could actually get traumatized. You were not kidnapped, but just the fact that you had the story could actually come negative to your emotions and could traumatize you. So those are things to generally just look out for to point us into place of trauma.
Okay. Can trauma change a person's personality? Can it change their personality? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfectly, yes. Remember, it's a wound. When we talk about wounds, we're talking about something that needs an injury. Okay, so just like somebody who is whole also physically, once they are wounded, it could affect their appearance. Like someone who had a burn on his face would affect his appearance. Someone who has a leg injury probably will start limping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the same thing emotionally. Once we have encountered trauma or we traumatize and we have to go through this kind of emotional pain, especially if we do not get adequate immediate help for healing, for restoration, it will have lasting impact on the person's personality. So you could have somebody who maybe before a rape incident that traumatized them, happy-go-lucky kind of girl, everybody's friend, jovial. And then the rape happened, and if she didn't get the support, the necessary healing strategies to help her deal with that, you could have somebody who goes into withdrawal. You could have someone who could become extremely quiet. Okay, who becomes phlegmatic, who becomes, so it's a change of personality, and those are things that could happen when someone is traumatized.
Before we go into how somebody can recover, this is another term we hear a lot, PTSD, post-traumatic. What is PTSD? How does it remain with us?
Okay. How?
Okay, what I mean, PTSD is another term that people use a lot. Yeah. So, what is it, and how can we sort of know that somebody or we are even suffering from PTSD?
Okay, usually for most of this PTSD, trauma, and all of this, I'm always careful with people, and I always recommend that they go in for professional diagnosis, professional awareness. I really, really, really do not like people doing self-diagnosis or being able or just saying, okay, I think I have an issue. I think I'm suffering with this. I think I have depression. I think I have PTSD. All of that. I'm always wary of that because there's something we call labeling. The mind is an amazing place. Okay, if I did think depression before, if I didn't even realize what depression is, okay, and I'm just having mood swing and I'm having mood challenges at a particular time, and then someone says to me, "Oh, maybe that's depression." Then my mind goes into, okay, maybe I have depression, and then you start building up on it. That's how the mind is. The mind is amazing. And then you start building up on it. And before you know it, the body would align. The spirit will align. Everything would align. And that's how powerful our thoughts actually are. So really, I would really want people focusing on that part. Rather, I would say focus on wellness. Focus on the positives. So even if you're struggling, even if you think you have one issue or the other, okay, we've already talked about the signs to look out for. We've talked about things to see. We've talked about what to pick. Then it's also important to go in for a proper checkup. Do not self-diagnose. Do not go online and start Googling and start picking things and defining yourself, labeling yourself based on the things you see there. You might be fine much more than you know. So there's a lot to that space. Why I always recommend that we go in for professional support.
Okay, so it's good to get a proper assessment. That's what you're saying. Go to somebody who can assess you properly and maybe give you a definition of what you could be suffering from. A lot of times when clients come to me, they say, "Oh, I think I've got this," and I say, "Oh, you've been to Dr. Google again," and they usually laugh because Dr. Google can take you from a headache to a brain tumor in a matter of seconds. And before you know, the person begins to feel the symptoms of what they feel they have self-diagnosed with. But let's go back to PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So should we just talk a little bit about what it is and how people end up in that state?
Okay. So PTSD actually, like I said earlier, because the PTSD is actually totally different from what we call acute stress disorder. So PTSD is a sign. It's especially when someone has been exposed to trauma, and the trauma is having negative effects on the person, and that's why I say it takes an average of about 4 weeks to define that. Once the person consistently, as in is going through the symptoms of the trauma for over 4 weeks, they will begin to say, "Oh, PTSD probably are setting already." Okay. Now PTSD, that's why it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-trauma. So that means a trauma occurred, and after the trauma, the person becomes stressed. Okay. And so that is where that disorder thing is expected. Okay, so that's PTSD. That's what it means actually. So now when people get into that state, it doesn't mean, of course, many years back, when we talk about PTSD, we are talking about maybe people who are exposed to high level of traumatic incidents, maybe like people who are at the war front, people who had maybe violence, people who were victims of serious level of violence. Okay, but right now, we know that that's not just it. Many people could experience PTSD wherein you begin to have recurring emotions when that incident happens again. So some people could be nightmares, okay, and then they keep dreaming or having nightmares of the incident that happened to them. Some people it could be flashbacks, okay, so they get to this scenario and then it pops into them again, just what happened, and then they freeze. Oftentimes, the brain couldn't just comprehend or move beyond the incident that happened to them. Okay, and it could play out in so many ways. Sometimes people think people who struggle with PTSD could be violent, but not necessarily, because it depends on the emotions attached to the incident that happened to them. That will go a long way to it.
So PTSD is what we are left with after the trauma. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a way of saying this is what can happen after somebody's had a traumatic experience. It could be a single event, like somebody being raped, somebody being kidnapped, somebody being robbed, and it could be obviously multiple. When people have it, it could also be secondary, which is what we're talking about. So you're listening to somebody else's trauma, and it impacts you, and you're left with something. Either the inability to sleep. I don't know whether you get that question a lot, but I get it often. Like, how do you manage? You sit with 4 or 5 clients a day and they tell you all these big things they share with you. And how do you switch up? How do you not take it into everyday life? So it's kind of different for us because of training. But does that leave us less humane that we don't feel the pain, of whoever's telling us the trauma? No, we don't. But I think it was important for people to we hear all these terms a lot, and a lot of it is good to sort of break it down so that people can have understanding. Somebody who may just not be feeling well or has an illness or feeling low mood is not saying, oh, actually I'm suffering from PTSD, so that we're quite clear as to how these terms are used, how people are using it to label, like we talked about, so that they're sort of people are knowing, being able to name emotions and feelings, and giving actually some kind of timeline to the feelings that they're having. So if you're having sustained anxiety, sustained sleeplessness, sustained inability to concentrate, sustained inability to, you're eating when you shouldn't eat, or not eating, then you begin to know that actually something might be disturbing me quite a bit internally. So it's in my mind. It's nothing I can identify on the outside, but something is happening in my mind that is causing my body to react. And I think one of the things I personally find fascinating is how the body actually ties to what's going on in the mind. I love a book. There's a book I read a few times called The Body Remembers. And I try to explain to people that actually a lot of the physical illnesses that we have are tied to mental health. I've heard that people who get diabetes can suffer from anxiety and nitritis. So quite a lot of it is linked to how our mind impacts, where people carry their attention, how they sit, how they exercise, how they move around. So it's important. What I'm trying to say is it's important what goes on in our heads and how it impacts the rest of us. So can somebody who has had a traumatic event, is now suffering with PTSD or some of the symptoms, is there hope? Is there a way that they can recover?
Well, yes, there is hope. There is hope. That's why I'm always quick to put it in correlation with physical health. Okay, that if we could be sick physically and we can get healed, the same way we could be mentally sick and we can get healed. Okay, so there is hope. Even if you are going through, you've been diagnosed, or you are just the one that knows by yourself that you're going through a tough period because of the traumatic past you've had or whatever happened to you, you can heal. I was able to heal. Many people were able to heal, and many of us are still standing up to say healing is possible. It could take a while, which is where I always come in and tell people, do not be too demanding on yourself. What had happened to you over time, maybe it took years, maybe it took, it didn't just happen yesterday. Okay, so if you're expecting a quick recovery, a fast, oh, why am I still dragging on this? Why am I still in this space after this number of years? You might be too hard on yourself. Okay, so being able to understand that first, healing is possible, recovery is possible. Okay, and then but knowing also that it's a process. What happened to you took a while, so healing most likely could also take a while. I would also not take away the place of miracles, because some people do a counter, quick, fast recovery. Okay? Yes, it does happen. Fine. However, majority of us will go through the process for healing. So that process means time.
Okay. So what you're saying is, well, I guess the summary is getting to know yourself, knowing some of these things, how you're behaving, and then noticing, the things that you're doing that you normally wouldn't do. But I think what is also get help, because you might need help to recover, but give yourself time, because as we said earlier on in the conversation, that people react and react differently. So somebody might have be robbed today and they are fine tomorrow. Somebody might take a week to recover. Some might take a month. Some might take 6 months.
Exactly.
So just as we are all different, to allow yourself also permission to take the time that you need to to heal, to recover. But I think it's also important to point out, like every other illness, some types of mental health will be managed till the person is no longer alive. So I think it's good to bring that kind of balance. We know there's healing. We know there is, in God is in the business of miracles. But some people, like, they are maintaining their high blood pressure, their cholesterol level, their diabetes.
I think a very good way I would always love to put that was a scenario where Jesus had his disciple about why some people going through some pain, why do some people seem not to be going through it, and he said to them, for God's glory. Okay, so reality is, in as much as we would have people who would encounter miraculous healing, in as much as we have people who would achieve their healing through the process of time, therapy, engagement, and all of that, we would also have many who would have to manage it, who would have to learn our best to live their life and still live a fulfilling life despite whatever they are going through. All towards a goal. And I think it's always beautiful when such people are helped to understand the purpose of their pain. So it becomes more, you have more ability, more tenacity to be able to go through the process of managing your mental health.
So, well, let me ask you a big question. Because that means I have to make sense of the illness. Yeah, the person has to make some kind of sense or have some understanding. But some people may never be
Understood.
We'll never have the capacity to understand that. Yeah. And let's even talk about family, because supporting people with mental health is tough, you know. So how, you know, the family also may not understand why God has permitted this person to endure what it is they're going through. Yeah. So yes, we always like to feel that there is purpose in pain. You know, God doesn't just permit people to suffer for, you know, for the fun of it. But it also, I just want us to acknowledge that it can be difficult for either the person who's going through it, especially if they have moments where they are lucid and can reflect. And also for the family that is supporting that person. Just like if somebody was suffering from, you know, some form of cancer that may be terminal, or it is difficult because the family is managing this ailment and having to sit through. So we like to believe that God has purpose in everything that he does. And if he's permitted for the person to endure this for this season, there is a purpose and there's a reason.
Okay. So let me put that into another perspective then, and which is the fact that yes, there's purpose in every pain, but humanly speaking, we always want to have answers. The way we are wired, we want to know why, you know, why me, you know. If God wants to have to put and why didn't he choose someone else? Why must it be me? You know, so that is always there, and the reality is just the same way we cannot find answers to so many things right here on earth. Same way with some of these challenges we're going through, we might not be able to find the answers here, but the way it plays out is this. And that is also now applicable to families and everyone who is struggling. The place of understanding that the pain, the struggle should not limit us. The pain, the struggle, whatever it is, even if we can define it, whenever we allow it to now determine our outlook in life, that means we are giving power to that thing. So I might not be able to control you happening to me. I might not be able to control it happening to me, but I can control its effect in my life. And I think that's a big deal for the person who is hurting, beyond the issue of there's a purpose in the pain. Okay? So understanding that you still have power. The pain does not take away your powers. You still have the place of authority, and self comes in to take charge in those concepts. Now, to the family of such a person, you know, one of the most painful things, in all sincerity, is to see a loved one in pain. Okay, it hurts you. You wish you could take part of it away from them. You wish you know it could be really, really distressing for everyone around the person. But here it is again, because in everything we might not have clarity while something is ongoing. But after a while, if we allow ourselves to grow beyond that pain and begin to be specific and look around for the blessings or the opportunities or the lessons that we can take from that pain, and through it extend to other human beings, then we begin to overcome those pains. So even though we might not, and Madam Lydia rightly put out to us that you see, we there are some times where we can't even find a purpose, as in it just doesn't make any sense why this is happening. But many times, if we can rise above that pain, then we will be able to manage the effect of that pain. And I think that what is most important is the process of managing the effect, either on the individual or the family members or the people around them. I've had people who had to, probably even this issue of Christianity, faith, disowned everything because they've committed everything they have to service unto God. And then something happens to them. Okay, and they can't just fathom why me? Okay, and this is something I would always say. I believe strongly the devil doesn't have powers over us as believers. However, we could go through the test of faith. Okay, and that defines some of these experiences we could have. So rather than thinking, oh, so maybe the spiritual parts are possessed, the devil possessed me, he's oppressing me, God allowed him to punish me, all of that. Rather than go there as, I've had to deal with people who felt it's a sin they committed, maybe it's an old sin, and then they start digging into their past, bringing out issues that maybe God has not forgiven me, and that's why this is happening to me now. No. Because the more we go down that route, we begin to allow the accuser of the brethren to feel big, to feel cool with himself. Okay, rather, we should know that if we are going through any of this now, it's a test of our faith. Okay, and at the end of it, the more we can be resilient, the more we can stand and still, there's the scripture I love so much, the one that says, we shouldn't allow him to rob us of our confidence in God. What that simply means is no matter what happens, just like the three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, even if he doesn't rescue us, we will still say it's God. So that is always something big, and it's a major thing. It's a battle, but we can go through it. And so, if miracle happens, fine, we take it. If it doesn't happen, if it's a process of healing we need to go through, fine, we take it. And even if that doesn't happen, and we have to manage ourselves through it, fine, we take it. We are just going to keep on being strong, and we're not going to lose ourselves or our sense of self in this journey of pain.
Okay. Thank you for that. I guess I'm just going to paraphrase what you've said, which is when we cannot find a reason, because I think half of the time why we struggle is we try to, I always say this, use a human mind, a finite mind to comprehend an infinite God. So if there is no rhyme, there's no reason, there's no understanding of what has happened, just continue to believe that God will be God, and it will all be well. It will all be well. Yeah. Okay, so we quickly come to time. Where can people find you?
Okay. Yes. Like I said, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a Christian as well. And so I work with people, whether secular or faith-based, and I work with in whatever context. I remain Timi, Oyebode. My office is in Lagos, Nigeria, but of course I work globally. Thank God for the internet, supporting you through the journey of healing. On social media, find me at Timi Oyebode, that's T-I-M-I, Oyebode, on any of the social media platforms. That's how to find me. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and quite an interesting conversation.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Dr. Timi. What an interesting conversation around trauma, acceptance, dealing sometimes with illnesses that there is no recovery from, because when we encounter trauma sometimes in our life, it's quite a defining moment, and some of it we cannot go back or change. We learn to accept and continue to live a full life. Thank you for watching. My name is Lydia Khalil, and I will see you next week.
LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, lcbntv.com, lifecomtv.com.